When you think of Disney movies, you tend to think of animated tales featuring talking animals, wonderful songs, and tales that stand the test of time. In 1979, Disney also meant laser battles, killer robots that would spin blade your insides out, and endings that found you in literal hell. Fun! Let's take a trip back in time to see if The Black Hole is not that bad. Welcome, one and all to It's Not That Bad, the podcast that looks for A grades in B movies, and a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network. I've mentioned this before on this show. Every now and then, I have reason to go back and watch films that I watched religiously as a kid. Movies that formed my cinematic appreciation. Movies that, thank God for the movie channels on TV, because otherwise I'd be spending a ton of money at the video stores and at the movie theaters. And I would watch those films over and over and over and over again. And then you go back and watch them as an adult and you realize what a dumb up kid you were. That's me, because today we're talking about 1979's The Black Hole. And here to join me is the woman who subjected me to this film the first time by bringing me to the theaters when I was, but a wee one. My mom. Mom, how you doing?
I'm good, and I'm sorry I broke you.
Yeah, I'm this way because of you. You know that, right?
Yeah, well, I'll take some of it, yeah.
You can apologize to all of our lovely listeners throughout the show. I'm me because of you.
And that's not a bad thing.
In some ways, yes, and in some ways, look at some of the films that we have to watch. But we're watching The Black Hole today. So when it came out, your initial thoughts, because I know you're a sci-fi geek through and through. People, you wonder where I get it from. You're now listening to her. But this film comes to theaters, and you bring me to the theater because you brought me to cool films. Initially, in 1979, what were your thoughts on this film?
Well, when it first came out in 1979, I thought it was a pretty good production. And it was Disney's first attempt at a PG rating. They'd never had one before. So for them, it was definitely a step forward. And of course, it came out not long after Star Wars. So they were getting in on the sci-fi, success of Star Wars and came out with their own movie. And for its time, the effects were very good. It looked pretty amazing on the big screen. There were some things about it that, like that very long overture at the beginning with nothing on the screen was a bit off-putting. But once you got into the story, it was quite intense at points. So at the time, I thought it was a reasonably good movie.
Yeah. And the other thing, too, is that we've already covered on this show Disney's second attempt at a PG film. Of course, that was Midnight Madness when we had Brian Colburn from My Weekly Mixtape on. But now we're going to go down the very first attempt by Disney, the film that actually gave them the idea to start up Touchstone Pictures and allow them to be able to take on more adult films. But before we do, it is time to take this Disney, quotation marks, classic and trailerize it.
In the far reaches of space lies a black hole, larger than any charted before, capable of sucking everything into it like a Roomba on steroids. But riding the gravitational waves like a surfer hanging 10 is a long-lost spaceship filled with silent killing machines, zombified androids, and a mad scientist longing to stop circling the drain and flush himself into oblivion. Now, a crew that sought salvation needs to get out of Dodge with the help of a floating trash can with the manners of a snooty, snarky English butler who knows he's smarter than everyone else. After an hour of talkie-talkie, they'll try to pew-pew their way out in this 90-minute example of why not everyone gets Star Wars. From Disney Pictures, it's The Black Hole. Rated PG for Protected from Gravity.
Yes, I did say after an hour of talkie-talkie, they have to pew-pew their way out of things, because strap in, dear listeners, because this film is slow to start. But before we get more into the plot, it's time to get into who is in this film. The movie stars Maximilian Schell, Anthony Perkins, yeah, Psycho Anthony Perkins, Robert Forster, Joseph Bottoms, Yvette Mimieux, Ernest Borgnine, Roddy McDowall, and Slim Pickens. However, there are a few almost starrings in this. The director apparently wanted to give the role initially of Dr. McCrae to Sigourney Weaver, but apparently the casting director thought, and this is according to IMDb, her name sounded unattractive. And then, of course, she went on to do Alien and be awesome, so what do they know? The role of Dr. McCrae was actually originally cast to Jennifer O'Neill, but apparently, and again, this is according to IMDb, because I am not an insider, and this movie came out when I was still a wee lad. They brought her in for a screen test, and they told her that they were going to have to cut her hair really short because they were doing a lot of stuff that was supposed to look in 0G. So they started cutting her hair, and this was apparently traumatic to her, so she had to drink her way through it, and then got into a car accident, so she got taken off the role. Linda Evans was also apparently interviewed for the role, but it eventually went to Yvette Mimieux. Under consideration for the role of Dr. Reinhardt. Now, Mom, I'm going to throw these names at you here. And going through this list is, let me know if any of these you think would have done better in the role of Dr. Reinhardt than Maximilian Schell. Harry Andrews, Peter Cushing, Herbert Lom, Kurt Jurgens, Patrick Troughton, yeah, Doctor Who Patrick Troughton, Christopher Lee, Donald Pleasance, Anton Diffring, Hardy Kruger, Max von Sydow, and Jeremy Kemp.
Yeah, that's quite the list. Could have done better than Maximilian Schell? Well, the only one who probably could have done better would be Peter Cushing, because he's Peter Cushing. And he was in every movie I think I've ever seen, practically. I mean, he brings gravitas to everything he does. So, yeah, he could have probably done a better job, but I think Maximilian Schell pulled it off just fine.
Yeah, I don't know if I can picture Patrick Troughton in that role. I mean, there's a possibility, maybe. Christopher Lee and Max von Sydow, I mean, they're ridiculously talented. So yes, they probably could have they could have done the role, but I don't know if they could have done it better than Maximilian Schell.
Yeah, there's something about Maximilian Schell in that role is that he really sort of looked the part of the mad scientist, which is basically what he was. And you could see it in his eyes. You could, like his whole physical presence just screamed, mad scientist. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure others could have done it, but could they have done it quite as well? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, with the idea of Patrick Troughton in that role, and
he was too short for that role.
Well, aside from being too short, perhaps, but the thing is, you take a look at him, and he had that a lighter presence as Doctor Who. So, I mean, I'm sure he could have acted it. It's all good, but I don't know. It'd be one of the situations where sci-fi fans would go in looking for Doctor Who, at least his version of Doctor Who, and definitely not get that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as a director, that is something you definitely want to avoid.
Yeah. The movie was directed by Gary Nelson, who's normally a TV director, but he did direct Freaky Friday for Disney before this. So, he has some directing cred. However, it was almost directed by John Huff, who had directed Treasure Island and Escape to Witch Mountain, and was set to direct the film, but then he dropped out to go do Brass Target. Now, there's actually an almost titled for this one, and thank God they actually changed the title of this, because this one was almost titled Space Probe 1. And instantly my teenage male brain says to me, they're going to like space probe the aliens. Yes, I recognize Beavis and Butthead didn't exist in 1979, but still, regardless of, The Black Hole is still a much better title than Space Probe 1. Like, really? Really?
What were they thinking?
I don't want to know. I don't want to know. Whitman Comics actually released a 4-episode comic book series about what happens after this film. And by the by, this film is now, and I don't want to make anyone feel old here, but I'm old, so I'm going to make people feel old. This film, as we record this, is 45 years old. Hey. So.
And if you're old, what does that make me? Don't answer that question.
But here's the thing. A 4-episode comic series came out that dictates what happens after this film ends. The first 3 were packaged up and kind of sold together. So those are commonly found, I guess, and not that expensive. I looked online to see how much this 4th issue of this comic run sold for. I was seeing prices up to $650 for this comic book, for episode or issue number 4 of the Beyond the Black Hole comic book series. So I know it's not Superman number 1, or Action Comics number 1, but it's still $650. There you go. The film had a budget of $20 million and was one of the most expensive films for Disney to make at the time. Worldwide, it only brought in $35 million. So still brought in money, but not as much as Disney probably hoped for. There are some accolades for this film, both good and bad. Let's start with the good. At the 1980 Academy Awards, the film was nominated for Best Cinematography, lost to Apocalypse Now. Well, duh, right? It was also nominated for Best Visual Effects, lost to Alien, score 1 for Sigourney Weaver. And at the 1980 Saturn Awards, it was nominated for Best Sci-Fi Film, lost to Alien, score 2 for Sigourney Weaver. It was also nominated for Best Writing, lost to Time After Time. John Barry was nominated for Best Music from a Film, lost to Time After Time, and was nominated for Best Special Effects, lost to Star Trek The Motion Picture. Now, we've talked about in the show about the rule of the odd number Star Trek films. I'm not saying from a special effects standpoint, Star Trek The Motion Picture was a bad film, because the model work and that film's boring AF. Like, I like Star Trek. I know you like Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
That film sucked as a film. Whew.
It was not their best effort.
No, it was not. I mean, could have been worse. Could have been worse. They could have gone to the end of the universe to find God.
Oh, we don't want to mention that one.
Oh, you know, we're going to have to one of these days. But at the 1979 Stinkers Bad Movie Awards, the film was nominated for Most Annoying Non-Human Character, for 2 characters, actually. Bob, as voiced by Slim Pickens, and Vincent, as voiced by Roddy McDowall. They both lost to Tweaky and Dr. Theo in Buck Rogers in the 25th Century. And if you want to know why they lost to Tweaky, the minute I saw that name, I'm just like, I know that noise. I know that noise. Funnier when you realize that that is voiced by Mel Blanc, like Bugs Bunny Mel Blanc, but
that actually makes more sense now.
It makes total sense, but bitty, 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 bitty. But the reason why we are here, and not because we like to watch old films that made us think we liked them, but we didn't, not anymore, are the critics. Our reason for being here, of course, is over at Rotten Tomatoes. The tomatometer sits at 41%, with the audience score sitting at 45. But let's throw the other numbers into the mix here. Over at Metacritic, the film has a Metascore of 52, At IMDb, it sits with a 5.9 star rating, giving it 59%. At the movie database, it sits at 58%, and Letterboxd has a 2.9 out of 5 star rating, equivalent to a 58%, giving this very first Disney attempt at a PG film a 52.16% aggravated aggregate. So, seeing it at that barely pass but definitely college fail level, is that accurate, do you think?
Well, it's probably not too far off the mark. Watching it again after all these years, it points out some of its weaknesses.
Mhm.
And you can see why the critics probably didn't go for it. And you can see why it would put some audience viewers off. I mean, if you were into sci-fi, you probably would have liked this movie. Those that were just going because it was a Disney movie and were expecting, something different.
Singing animals and no.
That was not what they were going to get. So I think the fact that this was Disney's first PG movie, that people didn't realize what that really meant, to move it up a notch, as you will, from like a children's movie to something that adults could watch.
Yeah. And the fact that this led to the creation of like Touchstone, it makes sense to create another imprint that's going to put out more mature offerings rather than put it under the Disney banner. Because, you see Disney, you're like, oh, yeah, cool. It'll be great for the kids. Oh, no, maybe not. Maybe not.
Exactly. And I think that's probably why it did not do as well as we would expect it to do.
Yeah. Of course, I mean, these days you've got Disney, Disney putting out freaking Deadpool and Wolverine. So, it's all on right now.
But now everybody knows what they're getting.
Well, yes, because Disney owns everything. So let's get to the breakdown of this film. We're going to start with Anthony Perkins, who played Dr. Alex Durant. Your thoughts?
Wow. Okay. I'm not sure what they really wanted out of this character, because he went from being a, straight-faced, person focused on a mission.
Mm-hmm.
They had a mission to do. And then turn into this almost hypnotized character, buying into this madman's ideas. When I think in the back of his mind, he knew they were probably way out of left field.
Mm-hmm.
And yet he fell for it all. So the character itself was not that scintillating, if you get what I mean. And I don't know whether it was from Anthony Perkins' performance, because we know he's a good actor.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen him in many things. But I don't know, this role just really didn't quite seem to suit him.
Yeah. I mean, as we take a look at the crew of the Palomino, and by the way, we're going to spoil the F out of this film, so you're welcome. The entire crew of the Palomino feels like it was written to be one person. They didn't have necessarily too much in the way of different personalities, but let's talk about Anthony Perkins for a second here. I'm just going to read what I wrote down here as my notes. Freaking emote. Like, you're Anthony Perkins. Can we show an emotion? Like, something. You are on a spaceship full of robots and humanoids, and you are the stiffest performance on this ship. Anthony Perkins. Psycho. Anthony Perkins. The what?
Exactly.
Like,
it was a very unemotional performance. And that's why it was hard to equate, the way it started up and the way it finished.
yeah. I mean, I understand that he is a scientist who, comes in on the mission and then is enthralled with the science created by Dr. Reinhardt. And then, of course, like the idea of being part of something grander than you are. Like, I understand that this is, every scientist's dream, to be part of something that is grander than them and grander than the universe that they are in. I get that. But he went through the whole thing acting like someone who just got told that every meal is going to be tofu and bran cereal. That's pretty much what it feels like. Like, if you're passionate about the science that is thrown in front of you, maybe show that. He had one moment of acting and emotion, and that's when he's having his guts ripped out by the Terminator robot that's running around.
That is exactly correct.
Like, whew. This is a waste of a perfectly good Anthony Perkins.
And I think we maybe perhaps need to blame the director for that, because he obviously didn't try and pull that emotion out of him.
Yeah. I mean, most directors will have kind of a character breakdown of who this person is and what their motivation is. Like, give Dr. Durant some background, right? If Dr. Reinhardt is right and Alex Durant is a scientist looking to be part of something that's bigger than him, looking to make his mark into the world, show us this, right? Show us his arguing to stay behind. Show us basically defending Dr. Reinhardt while everyone else is completely calling sus on the guy. Like, really, give us something.
Exactly. And we got nothing. We got deadpan. Yeah.
And it's not like they didn't have the space in the film, because it's an hour and a half film. It's an hour and a half film only. So a good level, a good time, Disney knows kids are going to come see a Disney film, an hour and a half. Cool. An hour of talking. Like, an hour of talking. And I understand the idea of, showing us the dangers of being outside the gravity well that's created by the ship. Okay, cool, fine. Put a little bit of, danger in there. It's kind of like, I hate to bring it up again, Star Trek the Motion Picture. They come across this anomaly in space that for some reason shakes the crap out of the ship and then brings them to V'ger. It felt shoehorned in, like, we've done enough talking in spaceship porn. We need to have something do something. Quick, shake the camera. Shake the camera and put on the blinky lights. It's kind of what it felt like.
Yeah.
They do this off the front, and it sets up like this little pocket that they're safe in and only safe in, which I'm fine with that. If he's the doctor, if he's the scientist on this team, maybe science a little while you're at it.
Yeah, exactly. And, of course, you watch a movie now from this point in time where we know a whole lot more about black holes and gravitational waves and all the stuff that goes with that and all the theories that are out there now regarding black holes. And then you look back, like you say, 45 years ago, they didn't have anywhere near the information. At that point, black holes were only a theory. They hadn't even proven they existed yet. Theoretically, they did, but physically, they had never been able to identify one. And that's 45 years ago. Well, now they can even take pictures of a black hole.
Yeah.
So, the science, when we look at it now and we saw what they were showing then, we know that there's a lot of inaccuracies in there. There's some tidbits of, good guessing if it was. But it's...
Well, apparently when Alan Dean Foster was writing the novelization of this film, he found so many scientific inaccuracies that apparently he wrote notes and sent them to Disney saying, you got to change this film because you are way off base.
Exactly.
Alan Dean Foster telling you that you might want to fix your film. Maybe you listen.
Yeah. When you're doing a science fiction movie like that, you need to get the science right.
At least the scientific basis that cements the plot.
Exactly.
Robert Forster, who played Captain Dan Holland, and I'm watching him and all I can think about is Jackie Brown. But your thoughts on him?
I think he did the job that he was meant to do. He was meant to be the captain. He was meant to be, I guess, for lack of a better word, the hero of the story. But again, the character needed... One thing we didn't get on hardly any of them, aside from Yvette Mimieux's character, is like, who are they?
Mm-hmm.
We know nothing, literally nothing about these characters at all. No background.
Yeah.
No understanding where their motives are coming from and their motivation is coming from. So, again, he did the job he was given, but there was not a whole lot of oomph.
Yeah. I mean, in that first hour, you're right. When everything is all talky-talky, you've basically neutered his job at that point. His job is to go in there and to be, Captain Action at this point, right?
Yeah.
He is the captain. He's the one in charge. He's the one who's, going to save the day kind of thing. But we got an hour of just blah, 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 blah. And when the action picks up, when it's go time, when it's time to get off the ship because ish is going down, then Robert Forster shines.
Yeah.
But it takes a while to get there.
Yeah. It took too long to get there.
Yeah. Also, give us a bit more character development than you're the scientist, you're the captain, you're the young lieutenant, and Yvette Mimieux is Dr. Kate McRae.
Again, a very unemotional performance. She said the lines, she looked the look, but there was no, to find out, for example, to find out that her father was dead,
mm-hmm.
and she had been holding on to that hope that he was still alive.
Yep.
There was no real emotional response to that.
Yeah. You find the ship that your father was stationed on. You board the ship. Oh, yes, your father passed away. Oh, sad. Anyways, it's like Loki at this point.
Yes, exactly. And again, it's just I don't know, do we blame the director for not pulling performances out of these guys or what? Again, it was a very, and I've seen Yvette Mimieux in other movies and she's really quite good. So I don't know whether her heart just was not in this or they just didn't give her enough to work with.
Okay. I'm going to rant for a second here.
Okay, rant away.
We need to talk about the character, Dr. Kate McRae.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the one character that they seem to do something with, that apparently she has this, as they put it, this ESP of being able to communicate with Vincent, the robot. And apparently only Vincent, the robot. You are on a ship with robotic life forms and she can't connect with any of them? If she's a technopath, and I'm fine with the idea of having the concept of a character who is a technopath, someone who can Deanna Troi with robots, basically. Which, cool, okay, I like the idea. You want to call it ESP, whatever, I don't care, right? But only with the one robot? No, because you can do so much more with this, right? You can create a level of suspense and intrigue by the fact that maybe she can communicate with old Bob. Maybe she can communicate with the other robots. Maybe she can feel emotions coming out of Maximilian. And then if she doesn't feel anything from the humanoid type ones, which I'm not going to spoil that one, you got to figure it out. Then it's well, why not? They're supposed to be robots. Why can't you feel anything from them? And also, if she's a technopath, she should be able to communicate with the ship as well. Oh my God, there's so much that could be done with this character.
And they didn't.
It's she used the ESP twice?
2 or 3 times.
With Vincent?
Yep.
Who can talk. We don't need a technopath who can telepathically communicate with a robot when the robot has a voice box.
Except when he's in another part of the ship.
Yeah, but still. Even when they're in their own ship, I'm sure the robot can communicate through radio. Like, it's a voice box. Like, give us Bob in that he's so damaged that his voice box is broken and he can't verbalize, but she can get the story out of him. Do that. Do freaking something with her.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what were the writers thinking when they come up with that. Like you say, when you stop and think about it for a minute, so much could have been done.
Yeah.
Why didn't they?
There are some books that I have read, and I'm not going to name authors here because I'm not going to sit here and shame authors, but I've read some books where it's like, this looks like a really cool sci-fi book, and then you start reading it, and they're bogged down in the smartness of the plot and the story and not the progression of the plot.
Mm.
This feels that way. This feels like, oh yeah, cool. So we got this ship and it's stuck in a gravity well, like that it creates itself. So it's actually protecting itself in this black hole. And the idea is for it to go into the black hole and see what's on the other side. And then it's, okay, cool. Interesting idea. Now what do we do?
Yeah, they really missed out on a lot. They could have brought a whole lot more to that movie if they had just opened themselves up to it. It was like they were stuck on this path, and for whatever reason, they couldn't get off it.
Joseph Bottoms, who played Lieutenant Charles Pizer. By the way, he is apparently the last living cast member from this film.
Oh, really?
He's your young hotshot on the team, likes to twirl around his guns. Your thoughts on him?
Again, he did the job. And actually, he had more emotion than anybody else in the cast, I think. He was kind of fun to watch, and his interactions with Vincent gave you that just a tiny wee bit of comedic relief.
Yeah. I mean, you have a robot that is a ton of character. We're going to get to Vincent in a bit there. You know, so how do the humans communicate with it? Like on a personal level, right? And again, this is kind of like the Data rule, right? Data is an android, but people treat him like a human, except for when his androidness kind of comes through. This is kind of the same way, and that the snark between the two of them, between Vincent and Pizer, kind of feels like Alfred giving those backhanded comments to Batman. That's kind of how it feels like, and I love when they do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was that was, as I said, that was the only attempt at a little relief in there. A little bit of comedy from all the science and all the other stuff.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing too is they portray him as, you know, the younger team member who's a little bit of a hot shot, you know, like ready for action kind of thing, but it doesn't really come out. And the problem is, in the first hour of the film, there's nothing for the hot shot to do. Like, okay, I get it, right? Like, maybe he's the one that goes around and starts searching the ship. Maybe he's the one who's really leaning in on like feelings of something sus is going on here, you know? So I don't know. Like, again, you have all these characters and they're all kind of written the same. And that doesn't, you know, bode well for a film that wants to take you on this journey.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Ernest Borgnine, who played Harry Booth. Your thoughts?
I like Ernest Borgnine. I've seen him in so many things over the years, and he is a very good actor. And he brought emotion to that role. But as it fit into the story, I'm not sure why that character was there.
Yeah. I mean, he's the only one of the team who's not wearing a uniform. He doesn't even feel like the Palomino crew. It's like he showed up, skipped wardrobe day, shot first day, and then like, oh crap, now we have to keep him in this sweater for the entire time.
Well, there was that one brief moment when it was mentioned he was a journalist. Like, okay, why is there a journalist on this trip?
Yeah.
What's his purpose?
Which is funny that I didn't even, you know, connect to that. And the thing is, if he's a journalist, if he's going to be the Lois Lane of this group, okay, fine. Maybe take a note or two. You know, Act like a journalist. Ask the questions. Be the one who, in being a journalist, gets the rest of the crew to think about, maybe we should get the off this ship because it doesn't seem like it's going to go well.
Yeah, and the way his storyline ended, it didn't feel right because that didn't feel like something that character would really do.
Yeah. I mean, his presence is always, always fun on screen. Like,
yeah.
He comes on the screen, you smile, it's him, it's good, right?
Yeah.
But flush him out. Flush out the characters.
Yeah. And that's one of their biggest problem with this movie is that they didn't do that.
Maximilian Schell, who of course played Dr. Hans Reinhardt. Your thoughts?
He chewed up the scenery. It's okay. He did what he was supposed to do. He brought, like I said before, that level of mad scientist.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I can't fault him. He did have some emotion and reactions.
He reminds me a little bit. I'm going to bring two thoughts to bear on this one here. The first one, of course, being Max von Sydow in the most non-Max von Sydow role, of course, as Brewmeister Smith in Strange Brew. Chew up the scenery. Come in and be over the top, right?
Yeah.
But then you also have Brian Blessing, who, from Flash Gordon, which Brian Blessing and Flash Gordon is chef's kiss at that point. But the thing is, this role didn't call for over the top. It called for more pulled back because think about it. He's been basically, from a dialogue sense, isolated for 20 years. Yes, he's surrounded by these robots, and yes, he talks at the robots and the humanoids, but there's no dialogue there.
No.
Like, I don't see him hanging out with old Bob going, I remember the good old days. No. I wish he was a bit more uncomfortable with the idea of other people on his ship.
Yes, when you take it in the context of, but you have to remember, when they mentioned that it was 20 years.
Yeah.
And he said, for you. Because the theory is that the closer you are to a black hole and the intense gravity, that time slows down for you. So for them, it was 20 years. But for him, it might only have been 10. So there's that. But again, if you're not paying attention, you would miss those little cues.
Yeah. I mean, luckily that's early on enough that you haven't fallen asleep by this point. Because I'll admit it, I was starting to fade a little bit as we rewatch this film. Because it's a bit of a slog. But when he's on the screen and he does play that, he's affable and then he's not, right? And you're really kind of second guessing. There's this one point though, where, things are about to go down and he goes up to Dr. McCrae after the other scientist, Dr. Durant, has been killed by Maximilian. He says, save me from Maximilian. And then he's like within 3 minutes, he's like commanding the robots to kill all the non-humanoids. Like, I don't know where that line came from.
Yeah. I agree with you there. That was like a non sequitur. Why?
If they had continued with that, right? If it was basically like he was playing up, so the robots were the ones in control, and then it was like, save me, get me off this ship, right? Quiet enough so the other robots didn't hear him. Then all of a sudden, it's a fascinating story, and the robots are the ones that have basically taken over.
Exactly,
and they kept him alive because he was the one that knew how to do the everything. Well, so much more that could have been done.
We just need to rewrite the whole movie.
Yes, pretty much. I would be fascinated to see this film be remade. The guts are there. The basis of a good story is there.
Yeah. A little tweak here and there, and you've got a heck of a good movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially with today's effects.
Oh, it would look so good. I mean, I'm not saying it didn't look good, for 1979.
For its time,
For
yes.
1970. Like, yeah, you watch it now in the year of our podcast 2024, and you could see the green screen outlines, and you could see certain aspects of it that don't hold up.
Yeah.
But in 1979, and I remember being fascinated with this film to the point of I had, dear listeners, if you are of a certain vintage, you will remember these things. I had the vinyl storybook. So it came with the book. It was on like a 45, and you put the record on and you read along with it. And when it was time to turn the page, ding! I had that book. I had that book and I
Yes,
had
you
that
did.
record, and I listened to it ad freaking nauseum because it was a fascinating story. I think it plays better actually as an audiobook than it did as a movie in hindsight.
Yeah. The special effects that they had in it for that time. I mean, the computer graphic stuff at the beginning, when you had all the green lines and everything.
Yeah, which
That was-
today looks,
It looks dated, but at its time, it was the longest computer graphic scene
mhm.
up to that point in any film. There had been not a graphic scene like that.
And then we had Tron 3 years later.
Yeah, that's where it got started.
And that's like when you see the progression of some of these films, like the model work is going to be the model work, right? Star Wars proved model work can work really, really well. There's no question about that. Love the little flashlight on their ship as they're scoping out the giant ship, but still, the robots though. Let's talk about some of these, okay? Vincent, as voiced by Roddy McDowall. R2-D2 with the personality of Beast from the X-Men and the snark of Alfred from Batman. Your thoughts?
You nailed it. I loved Vincent. He had more fun in him and more emotion as a robot
Mm-hmm.
than the actual human characters did for the most part.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, when you take a look at when you're making a sci-fi type franchise, you're looking for things that could be sold as a toy. It's marketing 101, right?
Yep.
How can you sell this movie, and then how can you sell the movie after the movie, right? Toys are the way to do it. Apparently, the toys didn't sell all that well, but you think about some of the films that came out around this time too, right? Battlestar Galactica, you had Muffet, the robot dog or whatever, Twiki from Buck Rogers, Bobo from Clash of the Titans. Like, why is there a mechanical owl in a story about, Perseus and Zeus and gods and stuff like that? Even K9 from Doctor Who came out around this Star Wars era time, probably to capitalize it on it well. Plus, give the doctors someone to talk to, right? But the thing is, as much as you want to make fun of the way the eyes look on Vincent, it added some personality to it. And the fact that he's not talking like a robot, he's not doing the typical thing, he's not going bitty, 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 bitty. He's talking like an actual character. And given the tonality of the film, I think you needed that.
Yeah, and I did read on the fact, you're mentioning about the eyes. Apparently, they were supposed to be completely different. They had an idea for like electronic eyes that could bring more emotion to the face, but they couldn't make it work, so they wound up with what they wound up with. So,
but I mean, if you're going to R2-D2 something into this, I mean, R2-D2 didn't have a face. He didn't have dialogue.
nope.
He's the most censored character in history. Clearly everything R2-D2 said was straight out of the hood because they had to bleep everything. But tonality-wise and dialogue-wise, Vincent is perfect for this. I'm even fine with the eyes and the way it looks because it does add some character to it, and then it's not just a ripoff of R2-D2.
Exactly.
And that's the thing. Twiki looks like a little robot boy, and it's cheesy.
Yeah.
Right? Muffet from Battlestar Galactica looks kind of cheesy. K9's the bestest dog, so we're fine. But as much as you want to talk about the eyes, at least the fact that the head can lower allowed them to be able to put some, not menace, but at least some emotion into Vincent as well.
Exactly.
But then you get Bob.
Poor Bob.
As voiced by Slim Pickens.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to let you talk about this before I get going here because I have thoughts.
Well, the voice, the Southern accent, it was a bit much. I think it was meant more for some comedic relief, but, he was funny and he was kind of a hero, even though he was beat up beyond almost all recognition. So yeah, him and Vincent, in my mind, were the heroes of the movie.
Oh, undoubtedly. But was there no one else in Hollywood available to provide the voice?
Other than Slim Pickens. Yeah, I know.
What the actual cowboy was going on with this idea? Break his voice box. He's supposed to be broken down. Break his voice box, right? And then you have a reason to have a technopath character like Dr. McCrae, and then it can be one of those things where they're basically acting through like just forlorn looks on the robot's face, like just slow movements. And then, she basically voices for him and is allowed to be able to emote for him,
Yeah, another opportunity missed.
One last one that I had to put down here, though. Maximilian, not the actor, the robot. Your thoughts?
He was suitably menacing, that was for sure. But I think they could have given him even more if he'd had a voice.
I'm going to argue you on that one.
You think so? Doesn't mean I wanted him talking all the time.
Yeah.
All it would have taken might have been a word or two.
I mean, like exterminate? No.
You need to get off Doctor Who.
Take a look at Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace.
Mm-hmm.
Darth Maul doesn't say much.
No.
So a couple words, maybe. But the idea of Maximilian being completely silent, but not really having to say anything. Like, there was an ominousness to him. And this is where some of the I don't want to say the word terror, because it's still a Disney film.
Mm-hmm.
But there was, you felt like if you were one of the characters in this, you would be suitably freaked out by this demon freaking looking robot.
Yeah.
Leaning in on you, like about to get up in your grill.
Yeah, he's the definition of a bad guy.
Yeah. I mean,
in robot form. He's certainly no Robbie the robot from Forbidden Planet. That's for sure.
But he brings the danger, Will Robinson. The thing is, though, is like his design was so cool and so unique compared to all the other robots.
Yeah, he was very different.
I kind of wish they had gone with the storyline that Maximilian was the one actually running the show.
Yes, I agree with you.
But I digress. We can't fix 1979, but if someone wants to fix this film for a future version, I'd be totally down with it. Like I said, I like the idea. And the thing is, I think the idea did actually influence some future films. There is a movie out there called Event Horizon, and we've talked about it on the show before.
Yes.
I know, right? I know. So if you haven't seen Event Horizon, let me explain why it creates that reaction. So when the trailer came out for Event Horizon, it looked like a really cool sci-fi plot.
And it was.
Yes. Being able to bend space in order to be able to traverse it faster. Cool idea. Really cool idea. And then a ship goes through, and then when it comes out the other side, it's like, oh, well, we actually went to hell. Let's put a pin in that one for a second here. But for the first 3/4 of that film, it was a really cool sci-fi plot and a really cool sci-fi film.
And then it turned to a gruesome horror film.
Yes. So if you went into it expecting a sci-fi film, you were sorely mistaken. But if you went into the film recognizing that it's a horror film and you're in that mindset from minute one, then all of a sudden you're like, okay, I'm good. I got this. We're good. And it makes sense. The end of this film, and if you haven't seen the film and you do plan on seeing the film, this is where you should pause the show. because I'm about to spoil the end of the film for you. The end of the film, they all end up going through the black hole and coming out the other side, not necessarily in the same place. So we'll call them the good guys, the remainder of the Palomino crew, they end up, I don't know where they end up. It feels like heaven. It feels just like a parallel universe. And Dr. Reinhardt, who is now trapped in Maximilian's body, is in hell.
Yeah. They went from a sci-fi movie to a moral allegory.
Yeah.
Like, the bad guys went to hell and the good guys went to heaven. Like, what is that?
Like, it's not like Dr. Reinhardt was standing on the ship looking out of the black hole and quoting biblical phrases. And then you could sit there and say, okay, maybe it's a biblical allegory. Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. But at no point was there any inclination that this black hole was the tunnel to hell.
Exactly.
Like, it's barely the Kessel Run. And I'm fine with Maximilian taking Dr. Reinhardt inside him and now is in control. Again, if Maximilian was the one running the show the whole time, then this would be a fantastic ending, even if it didn't end up in hell. They went to hell.
Exactly. And like I said at the time, it was kind of like watching a director try to be Stanley Kubrick. Like when you think about, 2001: A Space Odyssey and the way that was done. And that whole sequence going through the black hole felt like that's what he was aiming for, was to be like Stanley Kubrick. And nobody does that but Stanley Kubrick.
Is it an unpopular opinion to say that 2001: A Space Odyssey is a highly overrated film?
It has its ups and it definitely has its downs.
Much like a bone tossed into the air.
Yes.
I've tried.
Yeah.
I've tried.
I'm not a huge Stanley Kubrick fan. I will say that right off the top. I mean, but I am a sci-fi fan.
Yeah.
And I've actually read the book 2001.
See, I preferred 2010, the year we made contact. I thought that was a far superior film.
It didn't do as well, though.
No, of course it didn't do as well. No sequel ever really does as well. Like, rare is the occasion where the sequel surpasses the quality of the original.
Right.
But 2001: Space Odyssey did make my Keep Watch Pass list for movies with a number in the title as my pass film.
Yeah.
So, popular opinion or not, I don't care. I was not a fan.
Yeah. Like I said, there was parts of it that were really good. The whole Hal the computer, that whole section through there in that movie was great. But the beginning and the end, I could do without.
Yeah. If we did a 2001: Space Odyssey episode, Hal might be my MVP at that point.
Yeah.
At least the voice of Hal.
Yeah. But that's not the movie we're talking about.
No, we're not talking about, and we will not talk about 2001: A Space Odyssey because I don't think that movie qualifies for the show.
Probably not.
Probably not. Don't know why it would.
Because it would be a critic's doll. That's why.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. I get it. Kubrick is a visionary. I do. I'm not a fan of the film. And it's okay to not be a fan of the film that everyone freaking loves. And I do appreciate that film came out in 1968 and visually for 1968.
Oh, it was stunning.
Oh, absolutely stunning. But I know 92% tomatometer, 89% audience score. So there ain't no way in heck that we're talking about it on this show because it's a little above our pay grade here.
There you go.
Right. But we are talking the black hole, and we've gotten to the point that we need to get to. So, Mom, who is your MVP of the black hole?
No, it's got to be Vincent. Out of all the characters there, he was the most human.
Yeah. For a character with non-moving eyes, only a few moving parts, but Roddy McDowall, with that script, I will give this film credit. The script given to Vincent is probably the best lines in the script. And if you like Beast, the character from the X-Men, you're going to be right into this. And if they were to remake this today, Kelsey Grammer should be the voice of it.
Yeah, that would be a good plan.
No, my MVP is not Vincent, though.
Now, who is yours?
And it's not a human. And it sure ain't Bob. My MVP is Maximilian.
You like the bad guy.
Of course I like the bad guy. The bad guy makes the film. But the thing is, I don't see Dr. Reinhardt as... I mean, don't get me wrong. Maximilian Schell did a good job with the role. But I don't see him as the menace. I don't see him as the antagonist. I see Maximilian as the antagonist in this. And I wish... Like, I loved his ominous presence. I love what he brought. Seriously, this would have been the coolest toy. Yeah, Vincent looked cute. Yeah, Bob looked like someone drove over Vincent. Sure. If I were the age I was when I saw this film, I would have wanted the Maximilian toy because that robot was badass. Like, you think about some of the robotic characters around that time. Like, Maximilian to me, from a look and an ominous on-screen presence, is on par with Darth Vader and the Cylons.
Yeah. Definitely the Cylons.
Yeah. I mean, the Cylons were cool looking. Let's not beat around the bush here. Battlestar Galactica knew what they were doing when they made the Cylons. Production design was bang on.
Yeah.
For this. All right, Mom. Thank you so much for revisiting a 45-year-old film and making me see how wrong I was as a kid.
Sorry, I broke you.
I mean, don't get me wrong. It's a good film. I think it could be much, much better than what it was. And I think it's definitely fodder for a remake.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And I think this might be one of the fewer films that if it gets a remake, it would surpass the original and not just be a pale comparison.
Yeah, I think so too.
All right, dear listeners, you guys know the drill. If there is a movie out there that you think is unfairly maligned, or there is no way in a black hole that we're going to find anything good to say about it, hit us up on social media at Not That Badcast, or go to our website at notthatbadcast.com. And while you're there, make sure you check out all of our other shows. Until next time, that's my mom. I'm Jay. You guys are awesome. This is It's Not That Bad, a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network. Take care.
Waterproof Records are your unsinkable tunes from the past, present, and future. What's up, everyone? I'm Jacob Givens, the host of Waterproof Records podcast. So what exactly is a waterproof record? Let's go back in time for a moment to when you were a teenager, and it's the first time you heard an album that would change you forever. Whether you're a musician and it was the reason you picked up an instrument and started a band, or if you're just a music lover, it's the album that made you who you are to this day. You'll tell people that your life wouldn't be the same without it. It changed your DNA. So join me on the podcast where I do deep dives on some of the most influential and important albums in my life. And other times I welcome guests on the show to talk about their musical journeys and what they consider to be their waterproof record. It's time to wax nostalgic with Waterproof Records with Jacob Givens.